The wind had teeth that morning, sharp and white, biting down on the hills like an old grudge. Snow didn't fall so much as drift, lazy in the gray sky, but the cold, it was honest. The kind that found your bones and asked what you'd done to deserve warmth. He rode slow, a tall man in a black coat worn at the elbows, brim of his hat heavy with frost. His horse moved steady through the drifts, breath clouding like smoke from a dying chimney. The land around him was quiet, white upon white, save for the sharp fingers of stone jutting from the earth like broken ribs. The rock caught his eye first. Not its shape, but its stillness. As if something in the world had forgotten to move. He reined in and looked again. Then he saw her. She was tied to it. A woman, slumped, legs tucked awkward beneath her, dress soaked and stiff with ice. Her hair, long and black, tangled against the stone. Her arms bound with coarse rope. A trickle of dried blood at the temple. Her belly round beneath the fabric, unmistakable. He swung off the horse like he'd been dropped, boots crunching through snow. She didn't stir, not when he called softly, not even when he touched her wrist. But there was a pulse, slow, stubborn. Like a candle flame in wind. The knot was cruel. Meant to hold. He pulled his knife from his belt and worked it through the rope, careful not to jostle her too much. The blade bit through the fibers, and suddenly, her body leaned into his arms like she'd only been waiting to be allowed rest. Her face was young, too young for this. 22, maybe. No coat. No gloves. Whoever left her meant for the snow to finish what they started. He didn't ask who she was. The mountains didn't care about names, and neither did he, not right then. He wrapped her in the extra coat from his saddle and lifted her onto the horse like one might lift a wounded doe. She made a sound, not a word, just breath against pain. Then she whispered, "My daughter." Her eyes opened, barely. A glassy brown, dulled by cold and something deeper. Panic flickered there. He leaned in. "Where is she?" he asked, low. She shook her head. Couldn't say more. He rode faster going back, wind slapping at his face, snow hitting harder now. The trail behind them vanished quick as it came. When he reached his cabin, breath tight in his chest, he lifted the woman down, carried her through the door. And there she was. A little girl. Curled up near the hearth, half covered in one of his wool blankets, thumb tucked in her mouth. Her boots were wet, hair wild, face smudged with soot and sleep. Maybe 5 years old. Maybe younger. She blinked at him, then at the woman in his arms, and her cry tore the silence in two. "Mama!" The child ran forward, barefoot on his wooden floor, arms flung wide. He crouched, laid the woman down on the bearskin near the fire. The girl flung herself across her mother's chest. The woman stirred again. Her arm lifted just enough to pull the child close. Tears welled, but they froze on her lashes before they could fall. He stoked the fire, added wood. The warmth breathed life back into the air. The cabin was small, just one room and a loft above, used only when the wolves howled too close. A table, 2 chairs, his bed pushed up near the window, and the fire that had never let him down. He fetched broth, warmed a towel, placed the pot of snowmelt over the flames. His hands moved by habit. But his heart, that was doing something it hadn't done in years. It was listening. The woman drank a little, her hands trembling. The girl clung to her, murmuring in soft, worried sounds. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. He'd learned a long time ago that pain needs time before it speaks. Later, as dusk closed its fingers around the valley, the woman opened her eyes again. He was sitting across the room, sharpening his knife, not for need, but for the calm it gave him. She watched him for a moment. "You didn't have to bring me back," she said, voice thin and dry. He met her gaze. "Didn't have to leave you there, either." She looked away. The girl slept now, curled under his blanket, tiny chest rising slow. "They said I'd curse their name," the woman whispered. "Said the baby wasn't worth another mouth. That I was bad luck." He didn't answer. Some words didn't need reply. They just needed space to fall into the silence. She looked at the fire. "They tied me up like a dog. Left her in the trees. Thought she'd wander off. Or freeze." He swallowed. Not anger, something older than that. Weariness. The kind that sits in the chest and never leaves. "She found her way to the cabin last night," he said. "I thought maybe she'd been lost. Fed her. Let her sleep by the fire. She didn't say a word." "She's strong," the woman said. "She don't cry when she's scared. Not unless I'm hurt." The wind pressed against the windows like it was trying to listen in. The woman's hand drifted to her belly. She winced. "Still a few weeks left," she murmured. "If I make it that far." He stood slowly. Poured warm water into a tin cup, brought it to her. "You'll make it," he said, like a vow. She looked up. "Why?" "Because you're still breathing." She took the cup, fingers brushing his. Outside, the snow fell heavier. The world was turning white, again and again. But inside the cabin, something had shifted, small, quiet, but real. He didn't ask her name. She didn't ask his. Not yet. Sometimes, names came last. What came first was silence. Then warmth. Then the knowing that someone saw you and did not flinch. He sat back down. The knife in his hand stilled. And she, with the firelight dancing across her face, leaned back into the furs, one hand on her belly, the other resting lightly atop her daughter's head. She didn't say thank you. He didn't expect her to. But when she closed her eyes, she did it with the peace of someone who believed, for the first time in days, she might wake up safe. And that, in a place like this, meant more than words. Outside, the wind screamed through the canyon like a ghost chasing its own tail. Inside, a fire burned. And nothing else moved. The snow didn't let up for days. It came thick and constant, swallowing the valley in silence. The world outside the cabin seemed to vanish beneath its weight, the trees bowing like old men in prayer. The wind rose at times, howling across the ridgeline like something grieving, but inside the cabin, it was quieter than he'd ever known it to be. She stayed on the bed most of those first days, propped up on rolled furs, her daughter tucked close beside her. The child barely left her side, but when she did, it was to sit cross-legged near the fire, watching him with wide, dark eyes. She still hadn't spoken a word since that first day. But her silence was not fear. It was observation. She watched everything, the way he chopped wood, how he stirred broth, even the way he folded her mother's blanket with careful fingers. He found himself quieter too. Not because he didn't have words, but because they felt unnecessary now. Like throwing stones into a still pond. The woman, he still didn't know her name, moved more each day, her strength returning with slow dignity. She drank his teas, ate what she could, and once, when he handed her a tin of warm deer stew, her fingers lingered on his wrist a breath too long. Not in thanks. Not in flotation. Just in acknowledgement. A silent, human touch that said, I'm still here. There were no doctors out here. No towns nearby that would welcome her, not after what they'd done. But he had gathered herbs from the hills in seasons past, and his mother, long gone now, had taught him enough to ease a cough, stop a fever, or calm a restless womb. What he didn't have, he bartered for when traders passed through. The second night after the snow stopped falling, she asked him if he was married. He shook his head. Was once. Years ago. She didn't make it through the second winter. She only nodded. Her eyes said more than her lips did. She asked nothing else. Later that night, he found her by the fire, not asleep, just watching the flames. The child was curled up behind her on a bearskin, thumb in her mouth again, breathing deep. He knelt to stoke the coals, the light from the hearth painting his jaw in amber. She's 5, the woman said quietly. He didn't look up. She's strong. She shouldn't have had to be. Her voice cracked on the last word. She covered it by shifting, reaching to add another log. He took it from her hand and placed it gently. The man who tied you to that rock, he said, not a question. She leaned back against the wall. Her hands rested on her belly. He was kin by marriage. Said I was no good to the family. That I took too much and gave too little. She looked toward her daughter. They said the girl was a mouth they didn't want to feed anymore. Said I'd cursed their name. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. They told me to walk, she continued. Told me to take her and go. But when I asked for boots and food, they tied me up instead. Said the snow would do what they didn't want on their conscience. She paused. It was a cousin who left me there. One who used to bring me water when I was heavy with her. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. There was a long silence. Only the sound of the fire breathing. I didn't curse nobody, she whispered. I just didn't die when they wanted me to. His voice was low. Then they failed. She turned her head, and for the first time, he saw her fully, not just the hollowed cheeks and bruised arms, not the pain stitched into her steps, but the woman who'd survived it all. Not out of pride. Not out of strength. But because a small child had needed her to. He stood and crossed the cabin, lifting a bundle from the shelf. Inside were scraps of leather, a worn sewing kit, and a half-finished pair of gloves. I've got a piece of rabbit fur, he said. Was saving it for trade. Might be good for baby mittens. She blinked, surprised. I know how to sew, she said. I figured you might. He placed the bundle beside her. Their fingers touched again, lightly, briefly. In the days that followed, a rhythm settled in. He worked the woodpile. She boiled herbs and peeled potatoes. The girl began to speak, but only to her mother. Still, she drew him pictures with charcoal from the fire, little shapes of houses and horses, a man with a big hat. He'd find them on his chair when he came in at night, like offerings of trust. One afternoon, while the girl slept, the woman sat by the window stitching a torn hem. Snowlight spilled through the glass, soft as breath. She asked him what kind of man he was before the cabin. Just a ranch hand, he said. Good with horses. Better with silence. She smiled at that, the first real one he'd seen on her. You speak like someone who listens more than he talks. I try. And when people aren't worth listening to, I let the wind answer them. That night, she told him her name. It slipped from her lips so quietly, he almost didn't catch it. But when she said it, it filled the room like smoke, gentle, curling, impossible to ignore. It was the kind of name you didn't speak unless you meant it. He said it once, carefully, and saw something loosen in her shoulders. Something that had been held too long. In the morning, the girl said her name too. Laughed when he repeated it, shyly, like she'd given him a secret. He built them a cradle from pine. Not perfect, but smooth. Sanded by hand. When he carried it in, her eyes welled, but she didn't cry. She just ran her hand along the edge and said, "You didn't have to." "I know. I don't know how to repay you." "You don't have to." The baby kicked that night. Hard enough for her to gasp. She took his hand, without thinking, and placed it on her belly. "Feel that?" He did. Warm and sudden and alive. "Another fighter," he said. She smiled again, softer this time. He doesn't even know he's coming into a world that doesn't want him. His eyes never left hers. Some parts of the world do. Her gaze dropped to his hand still resting on her. "You're kind," she whispered. "But kind men don't stay kind for long." He didn't argue. Just looked at the fire and said, "Kindness isn't something I wear. It's something I keep." She let go then, and they both sat in the quiet, listening to the wind push against the logs, knowing it could not get in. The girl stirred once, looked at them, and fell back asleep. The cabin, once a tomb of his own grief, now breathed like a body warming in the light. And in that stillness, something was growing. Not love. Not yet. But something more dangerous, hope. Hope that maybe winter wouldn't last forever. Hope that maybe survival wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning. Outside, the snow softened. Inside, the cradle waited. The thaw came slowly, reluctant and gray, as if winter wasn't quite ready to loosen its grip on the valley. Ice melted from the eaves in slow drops. The creek murmured beneath the snowpack like it was waking from a deep sleep. Birds began to return, quiet at first, cautious. And the road to town, once swallowed by drifts, began to show its bones again. She hadn't asked to go. He hadn't suggested it. But when he came back from splitting wood and found her packing a bundle of worn cloth with the little girl folding scraps beside her, he didn't stop her. He only asked, "You sure?" "I need to face it," she said, not looking at him. "For her. For me. If I'm going to raise another child, I won't do it in hiding." He nodded. It was not his place to tell her how to carry her own weight. Only to walk beside it. They set out the next morning. She wore the coat he'd patched for her. The girl rode tucked between them on the saddle, small hands clutching her mother's waist. The air was cold, but not cruel. A sky of pale blue stretched wide above, and the road ahead seemed honest in its direction. The town sat quiet when they arrived, smoke curling from chimneys, snow packed into muddy paths. It was small, a collection of crooked buildings and weathered faces. People stepped out of shops to watch them pass. Eyes lingered too long. Heads turned. Whispers curled through the air like frost. They dismounted near the mercantile. She held the girl's hand tightly. He walked beside them, silent, steady, a shadow made of muscle and quiet principle. Inside the store, the warmth hit first. Then the hush. The shopkeeper, a lean man with thinning hair and suspicion in his gaze, looked up from the counter. His hand stilled on the ledger. She stepped forward, chin high. "I need cloth. And oil for the cradle. And flour, if you've still got some." The man looked past her. To the cowboy. Then to the child. Then back. "I don't keep account for your kind anymore," he said, voice flat. "My kind?" she asked, even though she knew. The shopkeeper leaned his elbow on the counter. Mouths without husbands. Names without homes. Trouble. The cowboy didn't speak. He only stepped forward, slowly, and laid $2 on the wood between them. "That's for the cloth and the flour," he said. "We'll get the rest elsewhere." The shopkeeper looked at the coins, then at the man who placed them. His eyes flicked down to the holster at the cowboy's hip, not drawn, not touched, just there. Without another word, he slid the goods forward. The coins vanished. They left without a thank you. Outside, people watched from porches and windows. A woman across the street crossed herself. A man spat into the dirt. Children were pulled inside by arms that trembled too much. She didn't speak until they reached the edge of town. "That's what I was," she said. "A burden. A shame they wanted rid of. Even now, they look at me like I'm filth." "They're wrong," he said. She stopped walking. The girl looked up at her, confused. "I don't need you to defend me," she said, voice sharp. Then softer, "but I'm grateful when you do." He nodded once. Nothing more. The road home was quieter. The wind had picked up, cold again, but not bitter. She held her daughter tighter than before. Her steps were heavier. That night, she didn't eat. She sat near the fire, staring into the flames like she could undo every look she'd endured with just the heat of her anger. He watched her a while. Then brought her the cradle. Set it beside her. She ran her hand over the smooth pine, eyes softening. "I was raised to believe men take," she said. "That kindness always costs something." "I was raised to believe it doesn't," he answered. "And yet you live alone." He said nothing. Let that truth settle between them. The girl, ever watchful, climbed into his lap and held out one of her charcoal drawings. This one was of the three of them standing beside a tree, a baby cradled in the woman's arms. No faces, just shapes. But it was clear who was who. He took it gently. Smiled without showing teeth. "She sees something," the woman said, almost like a question. "She sees hope." The woman laughed once, bitter. "Hope's a dangerous thing. So is winter. And you survived both." Later that night, her body shifted strange. She woke with pain low and deep, a tightening that stole her breath. She didn't wake him, not at first. She counted the waves, waited to see if they'd pass. They didn't. By the time she cried out, he was already at her side. "It's early," she gasped. "Too early." He helped her to the bed, laid down furs, brought water from the stove. The girl watched, eyes wide with fear, but quiet. He wrapped her in blankets and told her to sit close to the fire. The wind howled outside. Snow began to fall again. Inside, the air grew thick with labor. With her pain. With his silent presence. He held her hand through every wave, pressed cloth to her brow, whispered calm into the storm. She screamed once. Then bit it back. Her pride, even in agony, would not let her break. Hours passed. Then the cry came. Thin. Wet. Real. He caught the child in his palms, trembling now, though not from cold. Wrapped him in the same cloth he'd slept with since he was a boy. Held him close. The woman sobbed, not from pain now, but from the brutal, beautiful relief that she'd done it. That she was still here. He laid the child on her chest. The girl came forward, tentative, and pressed her face into her mother's side. They stayed like that for a long time. The fire crackled low. The snow whispered at the door. He sat back at last, watching them. The boy's tiny breath misted against his mother's skin. She looked up at the cowboy. "He's breathing," she whispered. "So are you." She reached out, fingers brushing his. Held them there. "Will you stay?" she asked, eyes glassy. "I've been here," he said. "No, I mean really. Stay." "I will." The girl laid her hand atop both of theirs, small and warm. And in that silence, something shifted again. Not the world outside. But the one within. They didn't speak again that night. There was no need. Outside, the snow fell soft. Inside, something had begun. Something not yet named. Something quiet. But unshakable. A family, not born of blood, but of mercy. And morning would find them still whole. The snow came again, heavier this time, thick flakes spinning like torn lace, falling fast over pine and stone. It blanketed the valley in quiet, erasing paths and softening every edge. The world became a hush, and inside the cabin, warmth bloomed like a hidden fire. She sat by the hearth with her newborn pressed against her chest, his breath feathering against her skin. The little girl sat beside them, humming to herself as she traced circles on the floor with a twig. The cowboy carved a spoon at the table, slow and steady, as if time had stretched itself just for this piece. But peace is a thing the past rarely leaves untouched. It began with hoofbeats. Distant, dull against the snow. Then louder. Steadier. Horses cutting across the white, drawing closer. He stood slowly, laid the carving knife down. The woman looked up, instantly alert, her body curling protectively around the baby. Then came the knock, 3 sharp raps against the cabin door. Not angry. Not polite. Just sure of itself. He opened the door without flinch. 3 men stood outside, horses steaming behind them, snow crusted on their coats. The one in front was tall and broad, but the kind of broad built on liquor and cruelty, not work. His eyes were pale and soured. The woman's cousin. "Well," the man said, eyeing the cowboy. "Didn't think I'd find you playing nursemaid." The cowboy didn't answer. He just stepped forward into the snow and closed the door behind him. "She's not yours," the man said, dismounting. "Nor that bastard child. We got kin rights. And you're harboring a thief. She stole nothing. She stole our name. Our food. Took and took. Then walked away like we owed her more. You left her to die." The man spat into the snow. "Don't play righteous. You think wearing black makes you some kind of saint? I think a man who ties a woman to a rock in winter doesn't get to call himself one." The other two shifted, uncertain now. They'd expected a meek handoff. Instead, they found a man who didn't blink. "We want her back," the cousin said. "We'll take the girl too. And the baby, well, we'll see if it lives long enough to need a name." The cowboy's eyes narrowed, but his voice stayed quiet. "You'll leave now." The cousin laughed, too loud. "Or what? You'll shoot us?" "No," he said. "I'll bury you." It was not a threat. It was truth, said the way wind says winter's coming. The man's hand twitched toward his belt. The cowboy stepped closer. "Go ahead. But if you draw on me, you won't make it halfway through the motion." For a long moment, the snow filled the silence between them. Then a voice broke it, soft but strong. "She's not going anywhere." The woman stood behind him now, wrapped in her blanket, the newborn bundled against her. Her daughter held her hand. "I've begged enough," she said. "Survived enough. If you came here thinking I'm the same woman you left on that stone, you're wrong. You think you're safe just 'cause he's standing in front of you?" "No," she said. "I think I'm safe because I've finally chosen to stop kneeling." The cousin scoffed. "You're just a mouth with nothing to offer." The woman looked at the cowboy, then back at her cousin. "Maybe," she said. "But he sees more than what I've lost. He sees what I still carry." And he did. He saw the fire she'd kept alive through silence and snow. The way she wrapped herself around her children like armor. The way she rose even when the world said stay down. Miriam appeared then, boots crunching over ice, rifle slung over her shoulder. Behind her came a few townsfolk, quiet, hesitant, but watching. "I heard shouting," Miriam said. "Didn't like the tone of it." The cousin turned. "This ain't your concern." "Everything decent in this valley is my concern," she replied. "And far as I can see, you're not part of it." The cowboy looked around. The townspeople weren't armed. But they stood. They watched. And they did not move to help the cousin. The balance shifted. The cousin sneered. "You'll regret this." The cowboy stepped forward once more, voice low. "I already regret not being there the day you tied her up." The cousin mounted his horse without another word. The other two followed, uneasy now. Snow swirled around them like judgment. They disappeared into the trees without a backward glance. Silence returned, thick as frost. The woman sagged against the doorframe, eyes wet, chest heaving. The baby stirred, then settled again. He turned to her. "You all right?" She nodded, slow. "I don't know if I'm strong or just too tired to keep running." He looked at her, really looked. Maybe they're the same thing. Spring came late that year. The thaw was patient, like it respected the need for stillness. Buds crept onto the trees. Birds built nests in the eaves. Life, quietly, began again. One morning, as the world turned green beneath melting snow, she found him outside carving something into a birch plank. She walked to him, baby on her hip, girl skipping ahead in bare feet. He handed her the plank. It was a name. Hers. Carved in strong, careful letters. "I was thinking," he said, not meeting her eyes, "if you ever wanted to be married, it could be here. Just us. Just honest." She didn't speak for a while. Just ran her fingers over the carving. Then looked up. "I don't need a ring," she said. "I know. I don't need promises. You've already had too many broken. I just need to know you'll stay." "I will." Snow still clung to the hills that day, though green pushed up from beneath. They stood beneath the birch where he'd carved her name. No preacher. No papers. Just him, her, 2 children, and the world watching in quiet awe. He said no vows. Just looked her in the eye and said, "I see you." And she, bruised, brave, barefoot in spring, smiled like someone who'd never expected love to look like safety. And in the hush of that wild, tender morning, with the earth still thawing beneath their feet, she whispered back, "I believe you." And the snow, for once, seemed to fall softer.